Howdy, y'all, it's Curious Raven. We are on day 10 of Advent, and it is a Creepypasta Saturday. Our guest is Danie Dreadful. The first story I am reading is written by Silly Wrongdoer 3709, and it is called They Don't Want Me Here, But I Can't Leave. I was at a shopping center just outside of my town, where I've lived for about 10 years now. I was going out to buy some clothes for my girlfriend's birthday, which was coming up. I had bought all of the gifts for her, most of which were clothes, and saw a J.C. Penney at the top of the escalator that I had never seen before. I fought my way through the crowd to get to the foot of the escalator. I went up to it and realized that it was spelt J-C-P-E-N-N-Y, the way the internet thought it was spelled for years, and then went crazy about it when it wasn't. I didn't take it much into account at the time and walked in. Immediately, I was hit with a strange sensation. I just couldn't put my finger on it. As I walked around, I suddenly realized there were no cashiers, no sales associates, not even a single customer except for me. Why didn't I realize sooner? I walked out of the store feeling very strange, only to realize I was the last one in the center. The crowd I'd literally just fought through to get to the escalator, gone. Every single person was gone. Standing exactly where I was, I looked around the center, not noticing anything explicitly different about the center than before. However, I could see something was off about the image ahead of me. Possibly just the lack of people, but that was still no explanation for what happened while I was in the store. I walked towards the motionless escalator and walked down. As I looked up to the J.C. Penney, it was just a white wall. I sprinted back up to look at it. There was no store there. It had simply disappeared. I decided my best option was just to leave. Luckily, I knew this shopping center well, so I could at least find my way out easily. I walked towards the exit. After a while, I realized I had been walking a lot longer than I should have been to find the exit. Maybe I was in a slightly different part of the center than I thought. As I kept walking, I realized I was by one of the shops where I'd bought one of my girlfriend's presents. At the other end of the center from where I was headed, I was beginning to get scared. What had happened to that store? Where did the store disappear to? Where was I now? And why can't I leave? All the questions kept rushing in and out of my head until suddenly I heard a scream. I jumped and backed off from the direction it came from. It was an extremely distorted scream. Further down the long white hall of the center, I saw a dark figure. It had no bodily features, but somehow I knew it was looking at me. Its gazing piercing my heart and my lungs. I decided to just run into the store on my left. The second I started moving, I heard lots of distorted screams all around me, terrifyingly close. As I ran through the store, I made it to the back exit. As I made it out, I saw people. It was a split second. Then they disappeared. I was left with a scene of destruction. Not like an apocalypse, cars crashed everywhere. But it still seemed as if there was nobody to crash those cars. As I walked out into the car park, I spun around. The numbness caused by shock took over my body and my head spun. The shopping center was gone. As I turned back towards the scene of destruction, it was gone. I was left with just a regular nighttime car park. There were no cars and still no people. I took a step forward further into the night. As I did, I heard the same scream again. It was much further, but not as far as I'd like. Whatever this was, did it hear me walking? I took another step and a scream happened simultaneously, closer this time. I began running. I panicked. It was stupid, but I couldn't just stand in the car park for the rest of my life. I kept running until the scream was directly in my ear. I stopped, waiting for whatever this was just to finish me. "Leave," I heard in my ear. I replied saying I couldn't. Something grabbed me. That was the last thing I remembered before I realized what was happening. I was standing in the middle of the shopping center, staring down an infinite hallway. I saw a figure ahead, a person. Thank God. As he walked in my direction, I began running towards him. Only I could hear the scream again. It was particularly behind me, but I didn't stop. It didn't catch up with me. The person made eye contact with me, thinking he would run towards me. He did the opposite and turned and ran. I heard more distant screaming, as well as the screaming practically next to me. I looked up to the upper floors to see one of the black figures again. All it did was look at me. I moved. It didn't chase me. I had to find the person. The one that Danie Dreadful is reading is by 1000 Adontonites. It's called The Old Christmas Cards.
The pretty female police officer smirked kindly at Johnny. Mom held his hand and gripped it encouragingly, even though she was horribly pale, her face creased with tears from ceaseless crying. The police officer said, "Okay, Johnny, we know Alice was last with you before she went missing, and I really need you to think carefully about what she said and did. You're being a real help." Johnny gulped. He knew he couldn't tell them, because if he did, the same thing might happen to him. Also, it was all rather blurry, and he wasn't even sure now what had happened. It had been 2 days since Alice had brought those old, musty Christmas cards home, and then she had gone missing and everything had been upside down. Mom squeezed even tighter and whispered, "Please, John." She never called him John. The police officer continued smiling at Johnny. John glanced towards Alice's room. Both Mom and the police officer caught it. The police officer said softly, "It happened in her room, didn't it, Johnny? Were you two having a little squabble in there? Then what happened?" The cards hadn't even been that scary, more just funny and weird. Alice had picked them up from their school holiday fundraiser. She had shown them to Johnny, silly pictures of old children with pumpkin heads riding a big lobster with long legs. Johnny had said they looked like Halloween, and Alice said, yeah, Halloween is her favorite, better than Christmas, and all holidays should be like Halloween, and she wished she could always dress up. Johnny thought that was silly because they got presents at Christmas, not Halloween. Then something had happened. Johnny wasn't sure, and now Alice was a pumpkin-head child in the card riding a giant lobster. He stared at the card with Alice in it, the top one. She was wearing the same clothes, which looked so silly, and her head was a pumpkin. Her eyes and mouth looked terrified, like she was screaming. Her mouth was a black hole. Johnny was afraid to keep looking at the cards. He put the one with Alice in it back in the box and put it in her room. Then he went back to his room. The pretty police officer left. Mom squeezed his hand a little harder than left too. Johnny heard her go into Alice's room. Then he heard her scream. They all ran into Alice's room, Johnny wondering if Mom would go missing too. She wasn't missing. The cards were all scattered around her, and she was rocking back and forth, sobbing and screaming. Johnny carefully picked up the cards and put them away in a secret spot in his own room. Alice was in there after all, and she should probably take care of her. Some people came and took Mom, still screaming, away. Much later, she returned and continued being Johnny's mom. Johnny never told anyone about the cards. Mom never asked, and Alice never returned.
That is the end of the stories. Hope y'all enjoyed them. Thank you to Danie Dreadful for joining us this year. I think this might be her second year. Please go check her out. I will leave her links below. She is such a delightful person, and I know that you will really like her narration. Anyways, I love y'all so much. I will see y'all for day 11 tomorrow. But remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross